auditioning for the Ontario Provincial Honor Band. This is a little tutorial video for the oboe auditions to help you try to maybe create a better audition video for a better chance of success. The first scale we'll be talking about is the C chromatic scale, and the tempo says 120 or faster. So what that means is that's a minimum speed we give you, so please do as fast as you can, but only as cleanly and as fast as you can. Nothing sounds worse than playing a scale, trying to rip a scale really fast, but it blipping and messing up all over the place. So please play it as evenly and as cleanly as you can. I'll play it once, and then maybe we'll talk a little bit about the scale. Okay, so that was quite a bit faster than half note equals 120, but please do it as comfortably as you can. The first note is we're starting on a low C. So what that means is you don't want to chip on the first note you play in an audition video, obviously. So you've really got to open your jaw, use a lot of air support to really let that C speak and not chip. Don't attack it with too harsh of a tongue, or that'll make the C harder to speak. So just make sure the reed is comfortable and your embouchure is open so you can really speak that low C. The first switch is actually a little difficult. C to C sharp, there's no way around it. You've really just got to use your pinky. Maybe set your C key on the first knuckle of your pinky, your outermost knuckle, and then use the tip of your pinky to press down the C sharp key, something like this. As you can see, my pinky isn't really moving much other than a little motion on the top joint of my pinky, and that will make that transition as clean as possible. The next one we should take note of is the break between C and C sharp in the middle of the octave, in the middle of the scale. And also try to make that, we don't want to hear the break. What you want to do with the break is to make it sound like every single other note on the scale. So what you want to do is to practice, just isolate those group of notes and practice that until you can get it as seamless as possible. So maybe repeat B, C, C sharp, C, B, and just repeating that 5-note pattern over and over again, something like this. So you can get it cleanly and you're not putting a blip in there like maybe I did for 1 or 2 of those. The third thing is you're going all the way up to a high C, which can be a little out of tune for some oboes, so you've really got to support it and really open your ears out to make sure that it is a true octave with the first low C that you started with, because that's a very important thing in the scale, that your first note and your last note are perfectly in tune within the octave. Also, hold that C for a full duration, for a full 4 beats before coming back down, because the scale not only tests you on how evenly you can play your notes, but also how you can count. Lastly, the last thing is you can see we're ending on a whole note low C for the end of the scale. So don't drop off, try not to chip, use lots of air. It doesn't call for a decrescendo, so there's no need to come back down, but please make sure that you at least taper it off nicely and not give it too abrupt of an end. The next scale we'll be talking about is E flat major. As you can see that there is no articulations written other than on the top of the page where it says tongue. So there's lots of different ways of tonguing the scale. Obviously there's legato, there's more staccato, there's even accented. So one thing for scales is if it's not written on an audition page how you have to do it exactly, show a different variety of what you can do, because you're given 4 chances here with the E major, the arpeggio, the B flat major, and its arpeggio to show different kinds of tonguing that you can do, and maybe experiment with that and show the additional panel how versatile you are as a musician. So I'll play the E flat major once. It seems like the tempo is once again chord equals 120 or faster, so that's the minimum. Play as fast as you can evenly. Few things come to mind. E flat, first of all, is not the easiest of note to speak. It's still pretty low in the oboe. So once again, like the C we talked about in the chromatic scale, open up, use lots of air so you don't chip on the first note. The second note, the F, is a little tricky because there's multiple fingerings for F, as you guys know, and sometimes it's really hard to see which fingering is the best. For something like E flat major, I would recommend using the left F key if you have a more advanced oboe, a more professional model of an oboe. It's just on the side, it's right here, it's a longish key right above your B key, your left F key, and your A flat key. It's right here. And if you don't have that on your oboe, then there's really only one choice you can do, and that's to use a forked F. from your E flat, because you don't really want to slide on an oboe from a low E flat to an F. Rather, you just want to raise your middle finger up on your right hand to create that forked F. But what happens is a forked F sometimes is a little out of tune. So once again, as you guys know, a little trick for a forked F is if you hold down the E flat key or not, it makes a little difference in tuning. I'll play it once to let you guys hear the difference. Sorry. You can see it affects the tuning a little bit, so whatever fits your scale a bit better, please use your tuner, open up your ears, and create a judgment of which better suits you and the scale you're playing. Other than that, E flat major is not too hard of a scale, so please, one thing about scales is play it very smoothly, and please hold the last E flat for, once again, the full duration with a nice dark sound, and maybe add a little vibrato if you can. The next one is the E flat major arpeggio, which is one of the easier arpeggios on the oboe, so there should really be no problem. I'll play it through once. Hold the last dotted half note for the full duration, and make sure that your low E flat and your high E flat are exactly 1 octave apart. For this one, I am using both the right hand E flat key, but it's obviously your choice if you're more comfortable with the left, as long as it's even. The next one is B flat major, which is probably one of the first scales you started off in band. Very simple. This only calls for 1 octave, so I'll play it once and we'll talk a little bit about it. First thing I notice is that you're going a little bit high up on the register for an oboe, so make sure that B flat up top doesn't shoot too high tuning wise, and is perfectly, so basically it has to be perfectly in tune with the first B flat you start with. So sometimes it really helps maybe play this a little slower, just so you can hear the low B flat that you're setting and make sure the top one reaches its mark. Once again, the B flat calls for either forked F or left F, and the situation is the same. If you have a left F on your oboe, I strongly recommend using the left F because it's a lot more stable, the tuning's a lot better, and it's a darker note. But if you don't, use the left F off of the E flat and hold down the E flat key or let it go depending on the tuning of your oboe and yourself. And the last one is the B flat major arpeggio. Same thing pertains. The main thing I'd be focusing on is keeping the octaves true and in tune, and also your decision of the F. Because you're coming from a D, once again, you can't use a normal F. You either have to use a forked F or the left F. I would go for the left F once again, but it depends on your oboe. So the B flat major arpeggio. You can do, maybe one of these you could do a staccato, maybe for the B flat. But obviously it's your choice, whatever you feel the most comfortable with. Thank you very much, and we shall be moving on to the etudes. So we'll be doing Etude number 1 from set A of the Ontario Provincial Honor Band Oboe editions. It is an andante candibile, quarter note equals 80, so it's a nice tempo, not too fast, not too slow. There's a little bit of leeway, so you can take your pick, but make sure it doesn't drag if you're going too slow, or if it goes too fast, it'll sound not very much like a lyrical etude, so please play in moderation. So I'll just talk about the first bar, first of all. Obviously, there's 2 eighth note pickups in the first bar, and we start from piano, there is a crescendo, and each of the quarter notes in the first bar all have a tenuto on it. So what that means is these are weighted tenutos and not really tongue tenutos. They should be a little bit more connected than normal tonguing, but not so much that it's basically a slur. It's more of a grave, darker tenuto up to that second bar, F, with an accent. So what you want to do here, you want to start very soft, show how softly and gracefully you can start, and make a big deal out of the crescendo into that high F, and then nice tapered release on that E on the second bar. So it sounds something like this. A good trick maybe is to blow out the spit in your oboe and make sure you have a clean addition. Once again. So what what you want to do, you want to make a difference between the accent and the tenutos on the F, and also maybe add a little bit of vibrato on the F to make it a very serious, very dark line. Moving on to the third bar, you get the piano again, so which means you've got to start where you start off on the first bar, which means for the tapered release on the beginning of the second bar, you've got to be able to come back down to where you originally started, because as we all know, hairpins do look like that, which means the beginning and the end should be the same dynamic. So for the third bar, starting piano on a high A, which means tuning can be a little bit of an issue, so really open up your ears and play that as softly, as gracefully as possible, but please make that a perfect fourth between the E that you just ended on and the A that you're going to start on. Once again, in the fifth bar, we have something, same gesture, 4 quarter notes, all with a tenuto on them. Start as softly as you can, and make sure the Ds are tuned. Ds can go quite sharp, especially as you crescendo, so make sure each D in succession is the same tuning as the one before it. And since it's repeating, you want to make, if you repeat something the same time, the same gesture every time, it gets a little bit boring. Just as somebody's telling you to do something, as they tell you more and more, they get more frustrated, more agitated, and that should be what you do with your music to give it a bit of direction. So that crescendo really helps, and maybe even a heavier tongue as you get to the end of the bar. So I shall play all the way to the end of bar 8, and then we'll talk about it afterwards. So what happens here, we can see the general shape of the phrase here from bar 5 to bar 9. Bar 8, we can see that the highest note is the G natural in the middle of bar 6. But just because it's the highest note, that doesn't mean that is the point of destination in the phrase. I made that a medium point of destination, so somewhere I stop for a little bit, give a bit more emphasis. But really, I think the end of the phrase should go, or the direction of the phrase should go all the way to the dotted quarter note E natural in the third beat of bar 7. So please keep the direction going, keep the intention going through the phrase so you don't back off too much as you come down from the G. Also, the 16th note triplets in the beginning of bar 6 are quite a bit faster, so please make sure that is in tune and you don't stretch out the time or distort the time in any way because it doesn't call for rubato. What I did last time I played is that I put a little bit of stress and a little bit of vibrato on that high G, so time might have been stretched a tiny little bit, only a Gothic, don't really change the tempo. And the last thing about this phrase is for the A that you end, the half note A that you end the phrase on, please make sure you go all the way and make that a dark A and in tune, because the end of a lot of phrases can go sharp. Please make sure that you're keeping that A low and comfortable. Actually, 2 more things. One is that in bar 7, that quarter note triplet is a true quarter note triplet. Don't distort the time. And I think that crescendo at the end of bar 7 should really stretch out all the way to the A, because E is, as I think, your point of destination. Make that a nice, loud, dark note with a lot of vibrato, and then don't use the decrescendo until maybe you're getting to the A off the G sharp, so that the phrase doesn't die off too quickly. The jump from the E natural to the lower G sharp can be a little difficult. It's quite a big jump. 2 things can help you. 1, lots of pressure, which means your air is going a lot smoother. More air obviously means more ease of control on the oboe. And the second thing, open your embouchure very vertical rather than horizontal. Don't bite. The more you bite, the harder it is for notes to speak, especially lower notes on the oboe. So please open up, make the reed comfortable so that the low note will speak. This also helps for starting phrases softer, as you have to do multiple times in this etude. So I'll play this phrase one more time. Count the wrists accordingly, and the next bar is basically an A flat minor scale all the way up to the high A, and then back down the octave. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that the high A at the end of bar 10 is very loud because you're at the end of the crescendo, but in tune and with a little bit of a vibrato. The higher the note is on an oboe, the less vibrato we want to use, or else it gets too wide and too crazy. And when you drop back down, you want to make sure that the tuning is a true octave, which means you've really got to open up your ears and you've got to open up your jaws to make that drop smoothly without a chip on the low A. Low A is not too hard to play on the oboe, but when you're coming from such a high note, there is a difference in embouchure. So you really want to make sure that the low A is comfortable so you don't chip. It will sound something like this. You do start on a mezzo forte, so you don't have to play it too soft, but please give yourself room to grow into the high A. 2 beats rest, and then we're moving on to the next phrase. The next phrase, stresses are on, there are accents on the 8th notes, so please make those, and the quarter note or triplets are true quarter notes. Start very soft. Once again, it is a piano. It'll sound something like this. So we can see there's half note accents on bars 13 and 14. Please attack those strongly, but don't attack them so much and use so much here that they go wild and out of control. No matter what, always play your notes in control on the oboe and in tune. There's a little writ at the end of the piece, so please do that to taste. Too much writ sometimes is too cheesy, too exaggerated, so you don't want too much, but too little and it'll be understated and nobody will really hear it. So please plan out accordingly. There are tenutos on the quarter notes, so please play them darker, a little bit of weight, and the decrescendo on the A, once again, don't decrescendo too early, and please keep the tuning as true as possible, and don't go sharp. Okay, next one is Etude number 2. It's more of a technical etude. Allegro quarter note equals 88. I would personally take this a little faster because 88 is not too fast. But whatever is most comfortable for you, and you can play it the most cleanly. For Allegro equals 88, it sort of tells you that this is obviously more of a dance type of etude rather than a lyrical song piece that we were doing for Etude number 1. So please make all your articulations more upwards rather than thud, thud. Nobody really dances with really heavy steps. And likewise, your articulations should reflect that, and they should be really light, maybe even like, if you apologize my analogy, maybe like fairies dancing or something very light. So the first phrase will sound something like this. That's the end of bar 4. All these should be normal Fs. Right here, we don't need the use of a forked F, and I wouldn't recommend using a forked F for anything because it's not as contained, it's not as dark, unless you have to. One thing about quicker etudes is it's all about direction. Obviously, notes have to be perfected and articulation has to be correct and crisp, but to make this sound not like a boring etude, but more of a piece, you really want to put a little bit of musicality, which means a lot of directions and difference in dynamics in the piece. So as you probably heard, in bar 3, I gave the whole that whole line from the pickup A8th note at the end of bar 2 and the whole of bar 3 was all going to the dotted quarter note F, and the same gesture going to the quarter note, dotted quarter note D in the next bar. So something like this. Start a little bit softer and approach that as your destination. And as we go on, it's a long string of 8th notes all the way to the end of bar 8, which means you want to take maybe a little bit of a bigger breath, a very light tongue, or it'll get very heavy, and make this as smooth as possible because this is going to be a challenge in showing the additional panel that you have a good technique. So please practice this until you can get this very smooth. And once you do that, you can make a phrase out of it and put in your own dynamics, crescendos and decrescendos as you think the phrase goes into something that sounds more melodic than just a technical exercise. So what I would do, I would start softer compared to where I was at the dotted quarter note at bar 4, start softer on the pickup, maybe crescendo to the high B flat, as that is the highest point of the phrase, or maybe even all the way to the G, the first G in the downbeat of the next bar, decrescendo all the way to bar 7, crescendo a little bit again, all the way to the C, and then you get that Sabino piano in bar 9, or in bar 9. So it sounds something like this. So something like that. As you can hear, I really went for that dotted half note C natural in the end of bar 8, and then that way you get that very drastic change for the Sabino piano in bar 9. That will take a little bit of practice. Keep your ears stream the same through that whole phrase with a lot of tonguing. It will really help your tonguing, and it will make your tuning a lot easier, so you won't have to worry about that in a technical exercise. But one thing about tuning is make sure that your higher notes, mainly your high B flat in bar 5 and your high C in bar 8 or bar 7, is not too high, because as you're playing technically, some people tend to not listen for the tuning, so make sure that is really true and you don't shoot too up. The next one, moving on, will be pick up into bar 10. The piano dynamic does carry on from the beginning of bar 10. So start from the beginning of bar 10, and this is just, this phrase, there's a little bit of a fingering issue, which I'll show afterwards. I shall play this first. So one trick here is, once again, deciding the fingering on the second eighth note F in bar 10. If you have a left F, once again, I highly recommend using it. It's not too difficult for that D minor arpeggio there. If you have the left F. But if you don't, you're going to have to once again use the forked F, because you don't really want to slide from the normal F to the D unless you're really comfortable with it and you can make it without a blip. This may work a little bit easier on this etude because it is tongued, so if you're very used to that, then you won't get the blip. But if you're not, I would recommend using the forked F instead. And please make note that the end articulation of bar 10 is 3 slurred eighth notes rather than 2. So play the articulation accordingly. Moving on, bar 11 to the bar 11, bar 12 is basically the same reiteration of the first 2 bars of the etude. So once again, come in as a full forte, play it loud, play it proud, but it should be generally the same style as you did in the beginning of the piece, as it is sort of a recap. The pick up to bar 13 to the end will sound something like this. So this is material we've never heard before in this etude. As you go down the scale, in bar 13, I would do a huge crescendo so you can get to that F, that forte. I put a forte myself at the end of bar 13 with that dotted, slurred dotted quarter note high A. Because I think right there, ba, 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 is something a little bit more stoic, heroic, especially something with this kind of rhythm. So I would put a little heavier tongue on them, something like this. Lots of vibrato in the high A, and then you can calm down the articulation a little bit, and maybe even put in a little rit at the end of or at the last bar. Once again, for that last note D, please don't go too sharp. D does have a large tendency to go sharp, so make sure you keep it settled. And the last etude of this set, etude number 3 in set A, is a larghetto quarter note equals 66. It's quite slow. C minor, you're starting on a C. C is not the best note in an oboe, so please just open up your ears, make sure that you can make that C as dark as you can. And there are tenutos on the beginning of each little group of 16ths. So these are weighted tenutos because they are under slur, so you don't re-articulate anything. You do obviously articulate the first of the slur, but these are more so to give a little bit of stress. The composer wanted a little bit of stress on the first of each 16th group rather than at the end. So I'll play the first few bars and it'll sound something like this. that we're getting the same gesture over and over again for 6 bars, which can be a little bit boring. There are no dynamics marked or different articulations marked here, so please be a little creative with how you're going to phrase this. Maybe crescendo all the way up to the middle of the 3rd bar and come back down, or within each group that you're repeating, make some louder than the others, because if there's a little bit of theory involved, the ones with the C group are all in tonic, the ones in the D are all in dominant. A little bit more exciting. It depends how you want to phrase that. It's up to you. One general mistake I would say, even I made a few times, is that you're backing off too early on the end of each group. So even though there is a diminuendo on each of the 16th and tied to the quarter, keep the sound going until the end of the quarter. So something like this. Instead of when they're sort of dying off. You want to keep the intention going all the way to the end of the note. Also, a little bit of vibrato here will do you a lot of justice. It'll make the piece sound a lot more mature and make you sound like a much better player. So if you can put the vibrato in, please do. Moving on to bar 6. Bar 6 onwards, we get near material and a sudden forte. So what I would do is make the very large contrast between the fortes and the pianos given the next bar back to the forte. So I'll start from bar 5 and we'll keep going. So something like that. Please make sure when you go to the piano in the bars 8 and the end of bar 7 that the tuning is the same, because if you're trying to come from such a loud dynamic to such a softer dynamic, tuning can be an issue, so please watch out. Once again, if you're playing too loud on the high C's as well and the high B flats, if you're playing a loud forte on those, tuning can also shoot up too high, so always open up your ears and open up your ears. Make a graceful ending at the end of bar 9 to that quarter note D. A nice, well-timed taper would be nice. And then we go to a little bit of a different section from bar 10 onwards to the end of the piece. It'll sound something like this. Something like that. Points of interest. Once again, choose your S wisely in the descending scales from bar 10 and bar 11. Once again, if you have the left F, use it. If you don't, use the forked F. And give all the scales direction. The goal of these small little scale gestures are all to the quarter note at the end of the line. So da 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 is what you want to do. And if you get really loud from the bar 12 to the quarter note of bar 13, you really do get that subito piano in the second beat of 13, which also means that subito piano, once again, is very hard, especially if you're up top. So please listen to your tuning. Don't go too flat, and don't bite so you're going too sharp either. So please listen for that. It is a B flat and not a B natural. And then this whole line, going all the way to 16, please make this as smooth as you can. This is going to be something else that can show off a little bit of flashiness within your technique. So please make it even. Don't speed up from the beginning of your piece. So pick the tempo of this piece correctly that you can play lyrically in the beginning and play with a little pizzazz in the second part of this etude. I just use normal Fs for the scales going down, or for the whole run from 13 onwards. And make sure that, once again, when you get to bar 16, the subito piano is present and tuning is correct. Okay.
And we don't care about the young folks, talking about the young